ADUs are one of the biggest topics in real estate right now. Places like Massachusetts just passed new laws that make them easier to build. But what does it cost? Who does it make sense for? In what situations do these work best? So today we're sitting down with Tom Loosigan, a local builder and ADU expert, to answer all of your ADU questions. So Tom, why are ADUs such a big topic in Massachusetts right now, and what actually changed with the new law?
So housing affordability is obviously a big problem. So Massachusetts was kind of on the forefront of this by trying to find a need to quickly make more housing options available and to come up with products that would be more affordable to build and to own. The idea with the whole ADU mandate is to increase housing quantity.
A lot of people are calling ADUs a solution to the housing shortage that we have right now. We're really in a supply-constrained market. And it's a way to address the affordability crisis. Are you actually seeing this play out in projects today?
Absolutely. The idea behind the ADU is to build a smaller but still practical and usable floor plan layout with all conventional codes and measurements, so you're not in the tiny house. You've got a conventional space that's
Totally
practical for everyone.
I feel like a lot of people used to come to us and say, like, oh, I'm looking for a multifamily to move into with my mother, or I'm looking for a multifamily and my adult children can move in. But I feel like the limitations with that were people felt like they were kind of living in apartments, versus this, kind of like what you're touching on, is people get to feel like they're living in a single family, they have that nice yard, maybe in a little bit more of a tree-lined neighborhood. So for someone hearing this for the first time, what is an ADU? What qualifies an ADU in Massachusetts?
Sure. So ADU stands for Accessory Dwelling Unit. It's similar to what the in-law apartments have been in the past, but an ADU can be either rented, have a family member living inside.
And that's huge, the ability to generate rental income on your property.
That's right. Yes, yeah. And in Massachusetts, ADUs can be used as an investment property as well. So if you own an investment property, you do not need to own or occupy the property to be eligible to rent it. It's helping people with investments, and it's also helping, but mainly people who need somewhere to live. As you know, land is so difficult to find.
Hard to find these
especially
days. They're not making more of it.
That's right. So this allows every existing single-family house to potentially be a new lot opportunity for a small dwelling.
They're endless. They're endless now.
That's right.
So we keep hearing about ADUs being allowed by right in Massachusetts. What does that mean for a homeowner?
So by right means that per the zoning regulations, you are allowed to do so, and the municipality really can't stop the construction project from happening, given that you are within the parameters set by the law. In the past, there's been very many circumstances where you'd need to apply for a special permit or a variance.
Even putting stoves in basements. I mean, that used to be a huge issue. I remember the fire department would come make people rip out the basement, or we'd have to hide the stove when the fire department came. So it's such a big change.
Yes, it is. It is. So now, as long as you are in a single-family zone, and you are able to place this new structure, whether it's attached or detached, within the building setbacks, you do not need to apply for a variance or a special permit for it to be approved.
I mean, that's huge. I know we're talking a lot about Massachusetts because that new law just passed in Massachusetts, but we live kind of in a border town, and a lot of people are considering both northern Massachusetts and southern New Hampshire. So for buyers looking in New Hampshire, are ADUs easy to build there, or does it kind of vary town by town? What's it look like there?
It's very similar to Massachusetts.
Right.
So in the summer of 2025, New Hampshire passed a similar state mandate that allows ADUs by right. Both Mass and New Hampshire have a cap on the square footage. It's around 900 to 950, depending on where you are. New Hampshire also is just more focused on providing housing for the owner-occupant to either rent or have for a family member.
Right.
It's not as investor-focused, but most of the need is for people who are looking for somewhere to live, somewhere to raise their family possibly, and just can't afford a single-family house in this day and age.
I see it on both ends of the spectrum. You had already kind of touched on this. Hey, Penny, you see either adult children who can't quite afford to get into the housing market. You're seeing the average age of the first-time buyer being around 40 years old now.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's a long time between college and 40.
Yeah.
And then you're seeing it on the other end of the spectrum with elder care. Elder care just being so expensive and unobtainable for a lot of families. So they need creative solutions to kind of have everyone under the same roof, you know? I guess, what are the most common types of ADUs that people are building right now, and what's driving those decisions?
So I've seen almost an even split between interest in attached or detached ADUs.
Yep. So a standalone structure that kind of has it's like its own, I don't want to say tiny house, but its own kind of small contained apartment living situation versus like a finished basement, finished attic, something like that, or even attached to the side, right?
Yes, that's right, and you bring up a good point as well. If the existing single-family house has enough space in an unfinished area, as long as you meet egress codes and you can meet all the safety regulations, you can use an existing part of your footprint as an ADU. More commonly, I see people wanting to put an addition onto the house, maybe with a breezeway to connect the two. That way, you really have your own separate space for the ADU, and you're not feeling as if you're in the same house. Attached or detached kind of comes with preferences from whoever's building the place. Because I've done a couple of them now that the family wants to have, say, their parents, so the grandparents of the children in the house.
Right.
They like the idea of being connected.
Yeah.
They're going to be coming over for dinner all the time.
Easy for them
They're
to
gonna
cook.
Exactly.
Sure.
And a lot of times the grandparents love the idea that their grandchildren can come and knock on the door of their ADU, and
right.
and they're living as a more cohesive family.
Absolutely.
Versus, if it's like the adult children type of scenario that you brought up, they're probably thinking about having their own space. Maybe they have a young family on the way.
Right.
So it's sort of like almost like a compound living situation where you can have your own detached little cottage type house, let's call it, all on the same lot. And so you're in the same area, but you're also separate.
It's perfect. So if someone came to you today, how do you decide whether they should build a detached ADU or versus something inside the home? What's driving those decisions?
So the main thing driving those decisions, especially in the Massachusetts towns that I look at, it's a lot of times the space on the lot. So like I had said, you have to conform to the building setbacks.
Right.
So you're not going to see these houses, these ADUs built right up to a lot line, right up to a fence that separates the neighbor.
Right.
That's not allowed. So a lot of times the decision is based on what room do we have right now on the lot.
Yeah.
Also, what are the existing structures on the lot? A lot of people have a detached garage that doesn't have any finished space in it above.
Are you seeing a lot of detached garage conversions right now?
I'm seeing a lot of interest in that.
Yeah.
I am. Sometimes there's a challenge with the garage is very dated, and there might not be a good structural base there.
Right.
But in a lot of cases, we can increase the strength of the framing for the first floor walls, and in that case, if you can use a detached structure, you're saving a lot of money, because a lot of the budget of building these, just like with single family homes, a large proportion of the budget is site work, foundation, and now if you're taking an existing structure, you've already eliminated those two large line items from your build cost. So
Absolutely.
It really gets more efficient if you do have a structure you can work with as a base.
Totally. I never want to throw out hard numbers on any of this stuff because I know there are so many variables, but I want to get into, just so people can have a ballpark idea to see if this is an option for them, what realistically does it cost to build an ADU in Massachusetts or New Hampshire?
So ballpark, a good ballpark to keep in mind is between 300,000 and 400,000.
Yeah.
I think that depending on the size, attached versus detached, the detached units do tend to cost a little more.
Yeah.
Because of logistics, and a lot of times you need a whole separate septic system, or a water line that needs to be run there rather than using what's already in the house.
Right.
But generally, the ADUs that I've built and that I've priced are in the 300 range.
Okay. And now, let's say you were going to do something like a finished basement in the house, or build onto the house as an addition. Are those numbers kind of the same still, or?
If you're using a finished space already in the house, or like our scenario with the detached garage that we were just talking about, the numbers are much more friendly.
Yeah.
So I would expect something in the twos. Maybe just generally speaking, maybe even less. I mean, if you have
it's so case by case.
It
like,
is.
You can't put a sticker on it. I get that.
It is. There's a lot of houses that are already kind of lending themselves to this. I think of split levels.
I'm seeing them in big splits. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that now you're starting out with sometimes an already finished lower level.
Right.
So now we're just putting in a kitchen.
Yep.
We're putting in a bathroom.
Right.
And we're just converting a couple of rooms.
Totally.
So now you're just getting into some renovations rather than building an entire new structure.
Absolutely. So that's huge. One thing I want to touch on too is, where do you see people get most surprised on cost? Where are things that they either didn't even think of, underestimated, that they should maybe start to prepare for if they're thinking of going down this road?
Yeah, I think access to the ADU is something that some people get surprised about, and what I mean by that is, I've done a couple of them where the driveway needs to be expanded like 100 feet.
Right.
Or like I said, you need to install a complete new septic system for the ADU.
Right.
These large site work costs drive the price, and that is something that can surprise a homeowner.
Right.
So the more convenient of a location, the closer to the existing structure, the more you can work with part of the existing structure,
right,
the more affordable.
Well, there's a site work involved, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So who would you say is the ideal person or situation for an ADU?
So the majority of the interest that I see is in the two ends of the generational spectrum.
Yeah.
So you've got the younger generation who 5, 6, 7 years ago were looking for single-family houses in the 300 range.
Totally. Wish that still existed.
Right, exactly. They can't find it. And so this has really taken the place of those starter homes for the younger generation. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's of course the aging in place, or the older generation who they've probably been in their home for a long time. They probably have a lot of equity in their home, and maybe they're at the age that they don't want to have a single family house anymore.
Right.
So for them, affordability a lot of times is not as difficult of a hurdle to get over, because if they've been in their house for 50 years,
right,
they can sell their house, take that money, and a lot of times it's more affordable than finding a small condo,
right,
or something like that. So now you have the advantage of cost-wise, it's a bit more advantageous, and also if you want to be around your family, you get to live with your family in the same lot rather than being in some condo or apartment type of thing.
Totally. So I think on the flip side of that, for anyone watching, when does an ADU maybe not make sense for someone?
I would say if you want a lot of square footage, and I should say if you are interested in ADU that you would like to be larger than 900 or 1,000 square feet, you can certainly still apply to the building department for such a product.
Yeah, so, you're just not automatically approved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but generally speaking, if you're looking for a buy right solution, and you need to be under that 1,000 square feet.
Right.
So, if you have a big family, and you're not able to kind of fit comfortably in a space like that, it's probably not for you.
Right.
But small families, couple children, I think the space is absolutely adequate. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a time that there were a lot of 1,000-square-foot ranches being built.
Absolutely.
And that
We
was the
still see 'em,
standard.
yeah.
That was the standard size for a
Right.
house. So we might be getting back to a time where we're living more within our means, and really, you can, if you intentionally design a house that's in the 900-square-foot mark, it allows you to have a nice footprint. So a very conventional footprint is a 26-foot by 36-foot buildable box.
Right.
And so within that, you can have a one-story building,
Yep.
which is nice too, because a lot of people don't want stairs,
Right.
especially for the older generations.
Yeah.
So you can build this kind of, I'll call it a newer version of a ranch.
Yeah.
That it just adapts to this time and the needs of people, and really we can make them in any style that you'd like. I've built them as a cape style,
Okay.
or we can also just have something that is very cohesive to the design of the house. So when you look at the home and you step back, it just looks like a larger
Part of
single-family
the house.
house.
Yeah,
Exactly.
just a bigger house.
It
Yeah.
depends on what the customer's looking for in that regard.
So I'm seeing a growing number of buyers specifically looking for ADUs. They come to me looking for space that will accommodate multi-generational living situations. From your perspective, are you seeing these projects driven mostly by lifestyle needs, or are you starting to see them think strategically as a value add? Because I would say they're probably the biggest value add in 2026, where we're already seeing housing constraints and we're seeing even fewer of these already on the market, these existing homes. People are having to build them, but there's a huge demand for them.
They actually can go hand in hand, where there's an immediate need. Most of the demand for these is an immediate need that needs to be met.
Yeah.
So it's older parents
Yep.
that have nowhere to go,
Right.
and we need to figure this out right now.
Yeah.
But the generation that's building these, maybe for their parents, they're also looking at this as a value add to their home,
Yeah.
because they know that eventually the situation might change and they'll have this house that now has an accessory unit on it.
Right.
And so that could turn into a rental down the line.
Exactly.
Or when their children get older and graduate from college or high school or whatever they're going to do, and they can't afford housing, now they're moving into the parents' former ADU.
Right.
So it's very versatile. The option to rent these as well helps supplement the mortgage payments
Totally.
on the primary house. So there are many benefits to building an ADU.
What would you say the biggest mistake people make when they start thinking about building an ADU?
The biggest mistake, I think they might underestimate the cost.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people.
It's expensive to build these days.
Building is very
Yeah.
expensive. It's the primary reason why you don't see affordable first-time type houses being built, or
Right.
for first-time buyers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's been somewhat of a barrier. So
Yeah.
some people just haven't kind of acclimated to the pricing.
I think it's going to
these
cost
days.
$100,000.
Exactly. All right. Yeah, that's I would say the number one surprise.
Yeah.
But even as we go further and further into this climate of high prices in not only housing but really in cost
Everything.
of living,
Yeah.
everywhere. I think it's kind of becoming more and more the norm.
Totally.
And it's just the situation we're in. So I think building more practical, smaller buildings that actually function well, like I had said, we can build an ADU that has a kitchen that is a traditional sized single family house kitchen.
Yeah.
You just might not have as many rooms that people frankly really don't use
Right.
that often in their house. We're not putting a formal dining room in these. There's just no room.
Right.
So we're concentrating on the rooms that people actually live in and spend their time in. A nice open kitchen, usually attached to a nice family room,
Yeah.
all one big open space. And then there's also plenty of room for a small office, a primary bedroom with a primary bathroom, and also a half bathroom.
Yeah.
And by the way, the square footage limitations do not include garages.
That's great.
So you can do an ADU attached to a single family house with extra garage space on it.
Yeah, that's huge,
It is.
especially in New England.
Absolutely.
And the winter we just had.
Yeah, that's right.
So what's something, to kind of piggyback off that, what's something people often think they can do or assume that they can do, but they can't?
Well, I think there's some education that needs to happen about the differences in the laws of renting these ADUs.
Yeah.
So, like I said, in New Hampshire, you need to be the owner occupant in order to rent.
Yeah.
So, but in Massachusetts, this is it's an advantage to real estate investors as well, because now they can add another small unit onto their investment property.
Yeah. We were seeing that a lot in these 3 families with maybe some unpermitted units in the basement and in the attic, and everyone went rushing as soon as this by right law went into effect.
I'm sure, and in that respect, it's also a good thing for the community if you're looking at it from a perspective of now we have a legal additional unit.
Right.
So all these things are obviously inspected and they have to adhere to current building codes.
Right.
So it's a much safer product.
Absolutely.
In this case.
Hi, Penny. So I think for anyone watching this right now who is thinking about the option, the ADU option, what should their first step be?
I think their first step should be really just jotting down a few of their primary needs for this. Because when I sit down with folks, there's similarities, but there's also always a unique situation with everyone.
Right.
So, figuring out whether you need to have a garage incorporated into it. A lot of times we work with, you need to work with the land. You need to, in building, it's all about, being cost effective by using what's there.
Right.
So if you need to have a garage, can we design you a garage under so that this whole structure is more cost effective? You can park underneath it and you have your little ADU apartment above.
Right.
So really just thinking about what the major things you're trying to accomplish is.
Yeah.
And then we can help you by suggesting designs. We have pre-designed floor plans, or a lot of times I just sit with the customer and we come up with a custom floor plan for them, and we design and build.
Sounds like the first step should be to call you.
Absolutely.
I love it. What would you say the biggest reason an ADU project falls apart or doesn't happen?
I think not having clear communication between all the parties involved as far as the customers themselves go.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple times where, maybe the parents are thinking one thing, the children whose house it is thinking something else.
Right.
And we finally find out maybe we're not all on the same page.
Yeah.
So I think sitting down with whoever's going to live in the ADU with you,
Right.
and talking about what level of privacy do you want? What level of connectivity do you want?
Right.
Like I said, I'm working with a family in Windham, New Hampshire right now. They have room on their property for a detached ADU. They chose to do an attached ADU.
Right.
Because they want to be close.
Yeah.
So it's all about what you're looking for. Luckily, there's a lot of options that the ADU state mandates encompass.
Yeah.
So these really, it's not like every project looks like the one before.
Right.
It seems like these are all kind of different, which is cool too, and it's nice for the overall look of the property. You can really key into what you're looking to do.
Yeah.
And there's probably an option to do it.
What are we seeing for different financing options people may have for taking on a project like this?
Sure. So there's a couple of different scenarios that usually play out. A lot of times, home equity lines of credit are used for this. Whether it's I'll call it the parent house that's being used, if that family has been there for a number of years and has built up equity in their house. I've seen customers use HELOCs to pull equity out and pay for it. Also, traditional financing can be used as well through construction loans, which roll over into a mortgage.
Yep.
And sometimes you have a situation where there's an older couple who's just sold their house, and they have the fortunate circumstance of having some cash to use, and then hopefully they have plenty left over to to save as well.
What's interesting is the MLS in Massachusetts recently added an ADU field. So it's actually a checkbox that you can now filter property searches by. So if people are exclusively looking for homes with ADUs, they can just check that box right in the MLS, which is a really new and big development.
It is. It is. That'll change the housing, the whole housing availability spectrum dramatically, because I think 10 years from now, we're going to see a lot of resales of houses that have ADUs.
Absolutely.
And, we'll see how much it affects the value. I can't imagine that that it wouldn't significantly affect the value. It will, just from an appraisal standpoint and just for usefulness of the property. You're totally right. We're going to see a whole new product kind of come into the real estate spectrum.
Absolutely. Another interesting thing that happened last year was FHA mortgages now allow for you to use potential rental income from ADUs to qualify for your mortgage. Wow. So a lot of first-time buyers who are using these FHA loans, which are 3.5% down, can go a little bit higher in their purchase price because they have the ability to rent that out. Now, whether they're going into it with family or renting it out to a friend, I think we've seen it play out in a few ways, but it's an interesting underwriting guideline that just kind of speaks to A, the need for this type of housing, and B, I think how much of it we're going to see, like you mentioned, over the next 10 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, so if anyone's interested in exploring their options, whether it be on their existing home or what they should look for if they're searching out for new homes, feel free to reach out to Tom. We'll drop his contact info in the description. And Tom, thanks for coming in.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, cool.
Appreciate it.